The whistle cut through the night like a blade. Mia woke with her heart sprinting, the sound drilling through drywall, heat vents, and into bone. Everyone in Elkwood knew the tracks behind her street were dead. Rails sunk, ties rotten, depot boarded after the wreck of '09. Nothing should move out there but weeds and foxes. Yet the whistle came again, long and low, trembling the thin glass as if a hand brushed the pane from the outside. She rose and crossed the cold floor, palms sweating though the air was November thin. She parted the curtain with 2 fingers. Moonlight washed the line where the rails had been, a silver scar running between black sumac and the chain-link fence behind her yard. The whistle called a 3rd time. The house seemed to lean toward it, the way a body leans toward pain. Mia held her breath and heard a whispering not of voices but of weight, the small familiar language wood speaks when it is asked to hold more than it should. The ground ticked. Somewhere a nail creaked. The air smelled faintly of coal that did not exist, and oil that had long seeped away. She told herself it had to be whined through the metal mouth of the signal tower, even though the tower had rusted down to a bent ladder and a memory. She told herself a coyote could mimic stranger sounds than a human might guess, even though she had never heard an animal raise a note so clean and so mechanical. She told herself 3 stories in quick succession and believed none. Her phone lay black on the nightstand. She picked it up, half to text someone, and half to have the weight of it in her hand, as though a small machine could anchor a person to the room she currently occupied. The screen stayed blank. Her own face, pale in the moonlight, stared back. The whistle fell silent. The house made its ticking noises. A car far away passed and faded. She held still until her calves hurt, then let the curtain fall. She stood in the dark and waited for the rush of sleep to return like a tide. It did not. Instead, a single image pressed against her mind. An engine where no rails were, passing soundless across the weeds, windows lit, carrying a car full of people who did not breathe unless someone looked. The image felt wrong in a way that was not cinematic wrong. Not the harmless wrong of a campfire tale, but the wrong that waits patiently, because it knows you must pass it in a narrow hall. Just before dawn, Mia slept. When she woke, sun on the wall, she nearly laughed at herself. The day was plain, and the whistle belonged to a night that had already emptied itself. She made coffee. She stood at the back door and looked out at the clean stripe of frost where the track bed cut the grass. Her breath fogged the glass. There were no prints. There was nothing to see, she told herself so. She said it out loud to make it heavier. Then, while the kettle clicked itself off, she thought she heard a far tap, like a hammer tapping a spike. Once, twice, polite, as if announcing an appointment that would be kept whether or not she opened the door. She listened to the whistle fading and returning, counting her breaths between notes. The cold air would not warm, and the house seemed to lean toward the sound. She told herself to wait 1 more minute, then another, then another. The night held its breath, and gave none back. She kept still, anchoring herself to the floor, to the ordinary room. By noon, the town had reheated its rituals. Coffee at the counter, small talk about rain, the same complaint about the same pothole on Main. Mia waited for someone to mention a whistle, a rumor, a prank. No one did. Every voice avoided the subject so completely that it felt like a plan. After lunch, she chose poorly on purpose. She went to the depot with a flashlight in her coat pocket and the idea that daylight cancels superstition. The sign over the awning still read Elkwood, the W hanging askew like a loose tooth. Vines netted the eaves. Under the platform, weeds like fingers. She put her shoulder to the warped door. It sighed and opened a hand's width, then wider. Then the hallway smell rolled out. Wet dust, old paper, a hint of mouse. Her beam cut milk through the dim. Dust lay drifted in corners, as if the wind had once carried snow inside and left it there to age. Something else had been inside more recently than dust. Footprints, not hers. The pattern was simple and wrong at once. boots placed with patient care, a line of deep ovals that crossed the waiting room and stopped in front of the ticket window. The glass in that window was cracked starburst, as if it had been struck from the inside. Her light climbed the crack, spidered, fell on the little metal slot where money once slid beneath and tickets slid back out. A current of air moved through the slot, cold as the mouth of a cave. She crouched and listened. It was not wind. It was a lonesome, low exhale, regular as a sleeping animal. Mia stood and followed the boot prints down the short corridor to the platform door. Beyond the door, the line where the rails had run looked like a scar healed badly. The late sun made a pale road of it. Between black trees on the cut, a brightness bloomed and dimmed, too steady for a reflection, too regular for a phone. She counted. The light pulsed every 7 seconds, like a far beacon that belonged to an absent lighthouse. The hair along her arms lifted. The door shuddered once, very gently, as if something large had shifted its weight against the other side. She left with care. She did not run. She did not lock the depot. Back at her house, she closed every interior door and sat on the floor with her back against the bed. At 4:11, the floor ticked once beneath her like a clock. A notification blinked on her phone from an unknown number. It contained a single word. She did not open it. She did not have to. Her lock screen showed the preview in cold white, all aboard. She listened to the whistle fading and returning, counting her breaths between notes. The cold air would not warm, and the house seemed to lean toward the sound. She told herself to wait 1 more minute, then another, then another. The night held its breath and gave none back. She kept still, anchoring herself to the floor, to the ordinary room. She promised herself not to wait. Promises made at 6 turned to wishes by midnight. She brewed tea she did not drink, set the cup by the sink, put on her shoes, and sat on the couch with the lights off, the flashlight face down, the phone screen dark. The house held that listening stillness a place gets after midnight. The yes I hear you silence of walls and pipes. At 12:40 the phone buzzed once and showed nothing. At 12:43 the whistle tested the air, softer than last night, like someone clearing a throat in a church. By 12:47 it arrived in full, a long iron note that made the water in the glass on her table tremble. Her breath synchronized with it without permission. In, hold, out, wait. Somewhere in the hallway a hinge sighed. Somewhere under the floor a beam made the unhappy sound beams make when they remember the weight of a long-ago winter. The phone lit by itself. No banner, no app. Just 2 words on the lock screen, as if written under ice, all aboard. She stared at them until the letters looked like familiar people in a crowd, then strangers, then a set of doors. Her bedroom door eased open with the smallest refusal of the latch. A thin glow pooled at the end of the hall, no brighter than a candle cupped in hands, and yet it painted a path along the runner rug. The whistle fell away, replaced by the sound of rolling that did not need rails, a bass murmur of something heavy searching for the exact space it always occupied. Mia stood. She did not remember deciding to stand, but she stood, and the house admitted her to the hall like a patient. The glow drew her forward. At the front door, her hand found the knob. It was cold as a coin pulled from snow. She turned it and stepped into air that smelled faintly of smoke and wet iron. Frost silvered the yard. The cut where the rails had been held a fog that rose a foot from the ground and then stopped, as if held inside glass. Far along that cut, between the enamel black of tree trunks, a headlight widened and narrowed, counting its own heartbeats. Her breath stung. She walked. She left the door open behind her, because some small part of her believed doors could still matter. On the sidewalk she paused and listened, for a car, for a neighbor, for any human world cue. None came. The night had made a private appointment with her, and did not intend to share. She listened to the whistle fading and returning, counting her breaths between notes. The cold air would not warm, and the house seemed to lean toward the sound. She told herself to wait one more minute, then another, then another. The night held its breath and gave none back. She kept still, anchoring herself to the floor, to the ordinary room. The thing that arrived did not claim to be a train. It claimed to be the reason trains were invented. First, the air grew directional, the way it does before a storm chooses a street. Then the platform boards at the depot groaned, one after another, as though a row of unseen people had set their weight down at the same moment. A cone of light parted the dark, but it was not attached to a headlamp so much as it was deciding where a headlamp would be. Windows assembled from light, doors guessed at hinges. The engine flickered between iron and heat haze, there and not, a contradiction that did not trouble it. Mia reached the platform. Figures stood shoulder to shoulder, the kind of crowd that ought to jostle, and yet did not touch at all. Suits from no decade, dresses that never quite wrinkled, hats with brims that refused wind. Faces blurred until she tried to look away, then sharpened just enough to prove that faces were present. Every person held a suitcase with a paper tag tied to the handle. She could not read the tags and also could. Her stomach dropped. A door opened with a theater hush. A conductor stepped down. He wore the uniform of the idea of a railroad. Cap, dark coat, buttons with stars. He lowered his head as if a brim still shaded his eyes. His gloves were the clean of empty rooms. "Ticket, please," he said in a voice like the end of a long hallway. Mia shook her head. "I do not have one." The conductor turned one palm upward. Her phone lay on it, lighting his glove from below. The lock screen still displayed the command she had not obeyed. "All aboard." The conductor's head tipped once, not quite a nod. "Then you are expected," he said. She swallowed. "By who?" He breathed as if the answer were a place. "By those who counted on you and did not count you," he said. The whistle sounded without moving the air. It said, "Choose faster." The cold air would not warm, and the house seemed to lean toward the sound. She told herself to wait one more minute, then another, then another. The night held its breath and gave none back. She kept still, anchoring herself to the floor, to the ordinary room. She took a step back and felt the platform edge with her heel. The depot door behind her shut by itself with a small, polite click. The crowd lifted their suitcases a few inches as one, as if to remind her of gravity. "No," Mia said, though the word came out as steam. "I am not supposed to be here." The conductor studied her as if she were a timetable that had gone missing and then been found with coffee stains. "Not supposed to be, and yet are," he said. He extended the phone toward her. The glass was warm. The words on it brightened until they seemed to sit atop the surface like cut letters. "All aboard." She reached for the phone and refused it at the same time. That is what it felt like. A motion with two answers. The light inside the car brightened. She saw rows of seats upholstered in a fabric her childhood knew, a pattern her grandparents would have called durable. In the nearest seat, a shape sat with its hands folded where its lap would be. The shape seemed to be watching the place just to the left of Mia's shoulder. "Who are they?" she asked. "Passengers," the conductor said gently, as if she had asked the name of rain. "From where?" he considered. "From times when it was almost you," he said. "From nights that missed by one turn of the wheel. From mornings that would have been shorter if a small thing had been heavy or light at the wrong second. From the appointment your bones kept without telling your voice." He looked past her toward her house. "From a last winter when you drove too tired. From a wet spring when the river misread its banks. From a night like this if you do not pick what you will be." The platform boards whispered. The car smelled of oil that could remember. Mia felt the weight of every hallway she had ever walked, every door she had ever opened half an inch to listen. She wanted to say a sentence with the word later in it. Later did not exist here, only now or never. The conductor waited. The crowd did not blink. Far behind them, the cut through the trees held still, like a mouth deciding whether to speak. She heard the whistle rise, long and human somehow, and thought of how her name sounded when called down a staircase. She set her jaw. She did not take the phone. She did not step forward. Not yet. She said very softly, "If I get on, do they stop counting?" The conductor's eyes might have been kind under the brim, or might have been nothing at all. "If you get on," he said, "you start counting with them." Mia closed her hand around the cold rail at the door and felt the metal imagine her. Somewhere in town a wind chime rang once. Somewhere in the trees a fox put one paw on a dead leaf and waited for the sound to stop. The whistle held its last note like a held breath. The platform leaned. The world considered her. She chose. She listened to the whistle fading and returning, counting her breaths between notes. The cold air would not warm, and the house seemed to lean toward the sound. She told herself to wait one more minute, then another, then another. The night held its breath and gave none back. She kept still, anchoring herself to the floor, to the ordinary room.